People say words can't break you. They're wrong. Some words stay with you forever, especially when they come from your own parents. For as long as I could remember, I wasn't Ethan. I wasn't their son. I was simply the dumb one. That's what my father called me. Sometimes as a joke, sometimes out of anger, sometimes in front of complete strangers. The worst part, after hearing it for 25 years, I started believing it myself. But one envelope, one unexpected phone call, and one check worth $47 million would prove that my parents had been wrong about me all along. My name is Ethan Carter. I grew up in a small town outside Denver, Colorado. From the outside, my family looked perfect. My father, Richard Carter, was a respected accountant. My mother, Linda, was a high school teacher. Education meant everything to them. Grades weren't just important, they were a measure of your value. At least, that's how my parents treated them. My older brother, Nathan, graduated at the top of his class. He became a heart surgeon. Every family gathering included another story about one of his successful operations. Everyone admired him. My younger sister, Olivia, graduated from law school with honors. She became one of the youngest attorneys at a prestigious law firm. Dad proudly displayed both of their diplomas in the living room. Guests saw them before they even sat down. Then there was me. No framed diploma, no fancy title, no impressive speeches, just Ethan, the son who never seemed good enough. School had always been difficult for me, not because I was lazy, not because I didn't care. Words moved around on the page. Reading took twice as long. Spelling tests felt impossible. Numbers made sense. Machines made sense. Building things made sense. But books were a constant battle. When I was 13, one teacher quietly suggested I might have dyslexia. She recommended testing. She believed I learned differently. When she called my parents, Dad laughed. My son isn't dyslexic. He's just not trying hard enough. Mom agreed. He spends too much time fixing bicycles. If he studied half as much as he plays with tools, he'd be fine. The testing never happened. Instead, I spent the next several years believing I really was stupid. Every report card became another argument. Every family dinner became another comparison. Nathan got an A. Olivia won another academic award. Ethan barely passed algebra. Dad always said the same thing. Some kids are born smart. Others, he'd glance at me, have to accept reality. Everyone laughed, except me. The only person who ever defended me was Grandpa Henry. He had been a mechanic for 40 years. He never finished high school, but he could rebuild an entire engine with his eyes closed. Whenever Dad criticized me, Grandpa smiled and said, "Intelligence isn't always found in books. Sometimes it's found in hands." Dad rolled his eyes every time. "That's why you stayed a mechanic." Grandpa never argued. He simply winked at me. "Keep building things, kid." When I turned 18, I decided college wasn't for me. I enrolled in a 2-year technical training program instead. I wanted to work with industrial equipment, automation systems, heavy machinery. I loved solving problems. Dad called it a waste of potential. A trade. He laughed. "Your brother saves lives. Your sister argues in court. And you're fixing machines." I answered quietly. "Someone has to keep those hospitals and courthouses running." He shook his head. "You always settle for less." After graduation, I found a job maintaining equipment for a manufacturing company. The work was hard, long hours, dirty hands, cold mornings, but I loved every minute of it. Every machine had a solution. Every breakdown could be fixed. Every problem taught me something new. Unlike school, here, I finally felt smart. Years passed. I became one of the best technicians in the company. Whenever a machine stopped working, they called me. Whenever production failed, they called me. Whenever nobody else could solve a problem, they called me. I didn't need perfect grades. I needed experience, and I earned every bit of it. Meanwhile, nothing changed at home. Every holiday, Dad compared us. Nathan just bought another vacation home. Olivia made partner. Then he'd look at me. "So, still fixing broken machines?" I'd smile politely. "Yes." He'd laugh. "I guess every family needs one ordinary child." My 30th birthday arrived on a Saturday. Mom insisted on organizing a family dinner at an expensive steakhouse. "I want everyone together," she said. For a moment, I actually believed they wanted to celebrate me. Maybe turning 30 would change something. Maybe Dad would finally stop treating me like a disappointment. I couldn't have been more wrong. The restaurant was beautiful. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Soft piano music filled the room. Relatives, cousins, family friends. Nearly 30 people attended. Dinner went well. People laughed, shared stories. Then dessert arrived. The waiter placed a chocolate cake in front of me. Everyone sang happy birthday. Dad stood with his wine glass. "I'd like to make a toast." I smiled, thinking, maybe this time, he'd finally say he was proud of me. Instead, he laughed. "You know, people always ask how I managed to raise 2 brilliant children." He pointed toward Nathan and Olivia, and one who couldn't tell the difference between a university and a toolbox. Several people laughed awkwardly. I forced a smile. Then Dad added one more sentence. The sentence that changed everything. "At least Ethan reminds us that not everyone in the family can be smart." The room fell silent. Even my brother looked uncomfortable. Mom quietly stared at her plate. Nobody defended me, not one person. I slowly stood, placed my napkin on the table, looked at my father, and calmly said, "I hope one day, you'll realize intelligence isn't something you can measure with a report card." Without waiting for an answer, I walked out. It was the first birthday I'd ever spent alone. The next morning, I was making coffee when someone knocked on my apartment door. A delivery driver handed me a thick overnight envelope. The return address belonged to a law firm I'd never heard of. Across the front, in bold black letters, it read, "Confidential, to be opened by Ethan Carter only." Confused, I opened it. Inside was a single letter. "Mr. Carter, your presence is required tomorrow morning regarding an inheritance valued at approximately $47 million. I stared at the number. Read it again, then a third time. $47 million. And I had absolutely no idea why. I must have read the letter 10 times, then 20. Every time I looked at the number, it felt more impossible. $47 million. There had to be a mistake. People like me didn't inherit fortunes. I was just a maintenance technician, a man who spent his days repairing machines and solving mechanical problems. Why would any lawyer be looking for me? I checked the envelope again. The name was correct, Ethan James Carter, my address, my date of birth, everything matched. At the bottom of the letter was one sentence. Please arrive at 9 a.m. Sharp. This matter is strictly confidential. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I drove downtown to one of the tallest office buildings in the city. The law firm's name was displayed in polished brass letters across the entrance. Everything about the place screamed success. Marble floors, glass elevators, employees in expensive suits. I suddenly felt out of place wearing my work boots and simple jacket. The receptionist smiled. Mr. Carter. I nodded. We've been expecting you. She handed me a visitor badge. Mr. Benjamin Foster will see you now. A few minutes later, a silver-haired attorney greeted me warmly. Ethan, thank you for coming. We shook hands. He invited me into a large conference room overlooking the city skyline. A thick file sat on the table. Beside it, a sealed envelope. Mr. Foster waited until I sat down. Then he spoke carefully. I imagine you're wondering why you're here. You could say that. He smiled. Today you're going to learn something that may completely change your life. He opened the file. The first page showed a photograph. The moment I saw it, I recognized the man immediately. Harold Whitmore. I hadn't seen his face in nearly 8 years. He had owned Whitmore Industrial Systems, one of the largest manufacturing companies in the region. Years ago, I had worked as an equipment technician in one of his factories. He wasn't just the owner. He regularly walked through the production floor. Unlike most executives, he actually talked to employees. He knew workers by name, including mine. Mr. Foster folded his hands. Mr. Whitmore passed away 3 months ago. I lowered my head. I'm sorry to hear that. He spoke very highly of you. I frowned. Of me. The attorney nodded. Very highly. He slid another document across the table. It was Harold's last will and testament. Several names appeared. Family members, charities, business partners. Then, halfway down the page, I saw mine. Ethan James Carter. I looked up. This can't be right. I'm afraid it is. The attorney smiled gently. Mr. Whitmore left you $47 million. And, he turned another page. 51% ownership of Whitmore Industrial Systems. I stared at him, unable to speak. You now control the company. The words felt unreal. There must be someone else. There isn't. My hands were shaking. I only worked there for 3 years. Mr. Foster nodded. Exactly. So why me? Instead of answering, he picked up the sealed envelope. This will explain everything. Across the front, written in Harold Whitmore's own handwriting, were the words, for Ethan. I slowly opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, then I've already gone. I imagine you're wondering why someone like me would leave everything to someone like you. The answer is simple. Because everyone else looked at your education. I looked at your character. My throat tightened. Do you remember the night the main production line failed during the winter storm? Of course I remembered. Half the factory had shut down. Engineers couldn't find the problem. Production losses were climbing by the minute. Most people had gone home. I stayed, worked until sunrise, eventually finding a tiny cracked sensor hidden deep inside the system. A repair that saved the company millions. The letter continued. The engineers had degrees. You had determination. Managers waited for instructions. You searched for solutions. When everyone else gave up, you stayed. I felt tears filling my eyes. No one had ever described me that way before. Over the years I watched you carefully. You never asked for attention. You never took credit for someone else's work. You treated janitors with the same respect you showed executives. That cannot be taught in a classroom. It comes from character. I looked up. Mr. Foster smiled. Harold believed leadership isn't measured by diplomas. He believed it was measured by integrity. The letter continued. My children wanted my company. You earned my trust. There's a difference. Money builds businesses. Character keeps them alive. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. For 30 years, my own parents had called me the dumb one. Yet someone completely unrelated to me saw value where they never had. Mr. Foster handed me another folder. Inside were financial statements, company reports, ownership documents. Everything was real. Everything. Then he placed one final document in front of me. A bank draft. The number printed across the bottom made my heart stop. $47 million. Payable to Ethan James Carter. I don't know what to say. Mr. Foster smiled. You don't have to say anything. Mr. Whitmore only had one request. What was it? Lead the company the same way you repaired machines. I looked confused, patiently, honestly, and never assume something is broken until you understand how it works. For the next several hours, we reviewed contracts, ownership transfers, board meetings, legal responsibilities. By the time I left the office, my entire life had changed. But I told no one. Not my brother, not my sister, not even my parents, because after years of being underestimated, I wanted to make sure people respected me for who I was. Not because of a number on a check. 3 days later, I attended my first board meeting as the company's new majority owner. The executives welcomed me warmly. After the meeting, the chief financial officer approached me. There's one issue requiring your immediate approval. What is it? He handed me a thick proposal. Our largest upcoming partnership. I glanced at the cover page, then froze. The company requesting the partnership was one I knew all too well. Carter Financial Group, my father's company. I looked at the CEO. Does my father know who owns this company now? The CEO smiled. Not yet. He slid the contract toward me. He's arriving tomorrow morning to negotiate. I slowly closed the folder. For the first time in my life, the man who spent decades calling me the dumb one was about to walk into a boardroom, where I would be sitting at the head of the table. The next morning, I arrived at Whitmore Industrial Systems before sunrise. The parking lot was already filling with expensive cars, luxury sedans, black SUVs. Executives carrying leather briefcases hurried toward the entrance. Meanwhile, I stepped out of my old pickup truck, the same truck I'd driven for nearly 8 years. I could have bought a brand new luxury car the day I received the inheritance. But I didn't, because I had promised myself one thing. Money would change my opportunities, not my character. As I entered the lobby, the receptionist smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." I smiled back. "Morning, Sarah." She handed me a folder. "The board is waiting upstairs." Then she lowered her voice. "The representatives from Carter Financial arrived 10 minutes ago." My heart skipped. My father was already here. I nodded. "Thank you." The elevator ride felt strangely quiet. I wasn't nervous about the meeting. I had spent the last week studying every contract, financial report, and proposal. I knew this company inside and out. What made my heart race was seeing my family, not as their son, but as the man sitting across the negotiation table. When the elevator doors opened, I could already hear voices inside the conference room. The assistant opened the large wooden doors. Every conversation stopped. About 20 executives turned toward me. The CEO stood immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." "Good morning." He smiled. "We're ready whenever you are." I nodded. Then, my eyes found my father. He was sitting on the opposite side of the room with two senior executives from his company. Beside him sat my brother, Nathan. My father glanced at me. For a second, he looked confused. Then he frowned. "Ethan." I smiled politely. "Good morning." He looked around the room. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, one of his executives laughed. "Looks like someone got lost." Another whispered, "Maybe he's delivering coffee." A few people chuckled. My father didn't stop them. He simply sighed. "Ethan, this is an important business meeting. You shouldn't be here." Before I could respond, Whitmore's CEO stood. He looked at everyone around the table. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." He walked toward me, then said the words that completely changed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to formally introduce the new majority owner and chairman of Whitmore Industrial Systems." He smiled proudly. "Mr. Ethan Carter." Silence. Absolute silence. My father's face turned white. Nathan nearly dropped his pen. One executive blinked several times. Another quietly whispered, "Chairman." The CEO pulled out the chair at the head of the table. "For you, sir." I thanked him, then calmly took my seat. Exactly opposite my father. Nobody spoke for nearly 30 seconds. Finally, my father cleared his throat. This has to be some kind of mistake." The company attorney slid a folder toward him. "I'm afraid it isn't." Inside were the official ownership documents. Signed, notarized, legally binding. My father slowly read the first page. Then the second, then the third. His hands began trembling. Nathan looked at me. "Ethan, you own this company." I nodded. "As of last week." "How?" "I inherited it." My father laughed nervously. "Inherited? From who?" "Harold Whitmore." The room became quiet again. Even saying the name out loud felt surreal. One of the board members smiled. "Mr. Whitmore believed Ethan was the best person to continue his legacy." Another executive added, "He spoke about Ethan often." My father stared at them. "He worked here as a technician." The chief operating officer nodded. "He did, and he solved problems our engineers couldn't." He earned everyone's respect. The meeting finally began. I opened the partnership proposal. "Let's discuss the terms." For the next hour, I asked questions, reviewed financial projections, suggested improvements, identified risks, recommended better solutions. The executives responded positively. Several even complimented my ideas. My father didn't say much. He simply watched. Every answer I gave destroyed another assumption he had made about me. At one point, a senior investor asked, "What inspired your leadership style?" I smiled. "I spent years fixing machines. When something breaks, you don't blame it. You understand it. The same applies to people." The investor nodded. "I like that." Several others agreed. Halfway through the meeting, the chief financial officer displayed a presentation. It showed Whitmore's recent growth. Revenue had increased significantly. Employee satisfaction had reached record highs. Productivity was climbing. One board member smiled. Most of these improvements were approved by Mr. Carter during his first week. I looked toward my father. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at me, with an expression I'd never seen before. Respect. When the presentation ended, the CEO placed the final partnership agreement in front of me. "This agreement is worth nearly $200 million over the next 10 years. He smiled. "It only requires one signature. Mine." I picked up the pen. My father suddenly spoke. "Ethan." His voice sounded different. Not proud, not angry, afraid. He stood slowly. "I need to say something." The room turned toward him. He looked directly at me. "I spent years believing my son wasn't intelligent. I judged him because he struggled in school. I thought degrees were the only measure of success." He paused. I was wrong. No one interrupted. No one moved. He looked around the room. "Today, I've watched executives with master's degrees ask my son for advice. I've watched experienced investors respect his judgment. And I realized, I never gave him that same respect." The silence became even heavier. I appreciated his honesty, but something still needed to be said. I stood, walked around the table, until I was standing beside him. Then I quietly said, "Dad, I never wanted to prove you wrong. I spent my whole life hoping you'd simply believe in me." His eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, I know, but apologies don't erase years of doubt." He nodded slowly. "I understand." I returned to my chair, looked down at the contract, then back at everyone in the room. This partnership could help both companies. But before I sign, I have one condition. Every executive leaned forward. My father looked confused. "What condition?" I closed the folder, then said the words no one expected. "If we're going to work together, your company must stop judging people by diplomas and start judging them by their ability." The room fell completely silent, because everyone knew that wasn't just a business condition. It was personal. The conference room was so quiet. You could hear the air conditioner humming. 20 executives, 6 investors, my father, my brother. Every pair of eyes was fixed on me. The contract sat open in front of me. One signature, that was all it would take. One signature could save my father's company, or one decision could end the partnership forever. My father looked at me. "Ethan, please." I had waited my entire life to hear him ask me for something. But this wasn't about revenge. It never had been. I slowly closed the contract. I'm willing to sign. A wave of relief spread across the room. But before anyone could celebrate, I raised one finger. On one condition. The CEO smiled. We're listening. I looked directly at my father. From today forward, no employee in either company will ever be judged by where they studied. They'll be judged by how they work. The executives exchanged nervous glances. I continued. If someone has talent, they deserve an opportunity. If someone has integrity, they deserve respect. And if someone learns differently, they deserve support, not ridicule. One board member leaned forward. You want us to change the hiring policy? I nodded. Completely. I stood and walked toward the large presentation screen. Then I displayed several employee profiles. This woman never attended college. She started in our warehouse. Today she manages 3 manufacturing plants. The room became quiet. I clicked again. This man left school at 17. He now leads our engineering innovation team. Another click. Our highest-rated customer service director was once rejected by 5 universities. I looked around the room. Talent doesn't always arrive with a diploma. The oldest investor smiled. I like this young man. Another investor nodded. So do I. One after another. The board members agreed. The CEO looked at me. I think we can make those changes. My father slowly stood. So can we. Everyone looked toward him. He cleared his throat. For years, I believed education was everything. I ignored people who had different gifts. He looked at me. My own son proved me wrong. The board unanimously approved the new policy. That same afternoon, both companies announced a joint initiative. It included skills-based hiring instead of degree-only requirements, paid apprenticeships for trade workers, training programs for employees with learning differences, scholarships for technical education and vocational schools, leadership opportunities based on performance, not academic background. The announcement spread quickly. Within days, news outlets picked up the story. Articles called it one of the most progressive hiring changes in the industry. Ironically, the son once called the dumb one had inspired it all. A month later, the partnership officially began. Business improved almost immediately. Whitmore Industrial expanded into 3 new states. My father's company secured its biggest contracts in over a decade. Employee morale reached record highs. Turnover dropped dramatically. People finally felt they were being judged fairly. One afternoon, an employee named Carlos knocked on my office door. He looked nervous. Mr. Carter, I just wanted to thank you. For what? I never finished college. I've been rejected from dozens of management jobs. But because of your new policy, I was promoted yesterday. His eyes filled with tears. My daughter finally saw me wearing a manager's badge. She told me she was proud of me. I smiled. No, you earned that promotion. I just made sure someone noticed. That evening, I received another visitor. My father. He stood outside my office holding 2 coffee cups. Mind if I come in? Of course. He handed me 1 cup. Just like he used to when I visited him years ago. Except this time, there was no criticism, only silence. After several minutes, he finally spoke. You know, when you were 10, you built a go-kart out of old lawnmower parts. I laughed. I remember. You told me it was dangerous. He smiled sadly. It was, but it worked. We both laughed. Then he looked down. I should have realized something back then. What? You were never bad at learning. You just learned differently. His voice cracked. I spent so many years trying to make you like Nathan and Olivia. I never appreciated the person you already were. I looked out the window. I used to wish I was more like them. He shook his head. I'm glad you're not. Several weeks later, the annual shareholders meeting was held. Nearly 500 people attended. Investors, employees, community leaders, journalists. The stage was beautifully decorated. Our partnership had become one of the biggest business success stories of the year. As CEO, I was scheduled to give the opening speech. But before I walked onto the stage, my father stopped me. Ethan, can I ask one favor? What is it? I'd like to speak first. I looked surprised. You. He nodded. There are some things I need to say. I smiled. The stage is yours. A few minutes later, the lights dimmed. My father walked slowly toward the podium. No business presentation, no financial report, no prepared slides, just a father, standing before hundreds of people, holding a microphone. He looked directly at the audience, then toward me. He took a deep breath, and said, before we celebrate this company's future, quote, I need to tell everyone how I almost destroyed my own son's confidence. The room fell completely silent, because nobody expected what came next.